The subject of kinyanim, meaning a fellow, he knows that there's a woman about to get divorced. There's a lot of issues between her husband and her. And he goes ahead and he said to her, here I'm giving you a ring, and this will be my proposal after you get fully divorced. Is that effective manner of acquisition, kinyan, or not? Another point is if a fellow gives two rings to a single woman, and he said, this will be my betrothed, and this will be after I divorce you. So the general subject is, when it's come to a matter of acquisition, especially in conjunction to our constant subject, which is the matter of vow and oath, how far you go with that. The basis on that is the discussion in the Mishnah, which the Rambam elaborates in Hilchot Me'ilah. When you have a fellow that made a statement, such as, you see this sapling will be consecrated as a offering. And the idea is, if it wasn't a fowl, it's basically consecrated. So he needs to go ahead and redeem them. The problem is, as Rav Pada tells us yesterday, that it's like a vicious circle, which is each and every time you consecrate it, you have to go back and return to the same position. Let me share with you a Rambam in Hilchot Me'ilah, in the law of misuse items, chapter 4. Here we're dealing with a conjunction with Mishnah we studied day before yesterday. The Rambam said, if one says, these saplings are like an offering if they do not fall down today, if the day passes and they do not fall down, they are consecrated and must be redeemed like other consecrated items. Then the Rambam and the Kesef Mishnah elaborates, and they said, if one says these saplings are like an offering until they cut down, he cannot permanently redeem them, since the sanctity continually takes effect until they are cut down. So here is the idea that the pidyon, the redemption, is again and again and again. It's you cut it, you redeem it, and it goes back to the same sanctity. So in short, you see here the whole subject of transactions, the effective transactions, and in conjunction to matter of oath. That's the subject of today. Today we're going to study page 30 in Tractate Nedarim. We'll start on the page 29b, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Yativ Rabbi Avin ורבי יצחק ברבי קמי דרבי ירמיה עושם ברבי יוסף שם וכמנמנם רבי ירמיה יתווי וכאמרי לבר פדה. So the idea that he was old, Rabbi Yirmiyah, and he was in a way menamnem, meaning dozing off. It reminds me of one of the greatest scholars that I have the privilege to be students, and we sat there, very similar, and he looks like he's sleeping, and we continue our discussion, and suddenly he opened his eyes and he commented very sharply on our discussion. So he is the same. He most probably the muscles in his eyes were soft because of his age, but he was very alert. He heard the conversation. So anyway, the Amar Pda'an Chozrot Vekodeshot. So the Rosh said that there are two options here. Either the Ula disputed Bar Pada, or you said that since he's part of that, Bar Pada mentioned his name. But the key is, as we said, this is a cycle of someone who consecrated. He sees saplings, he consecrated it. Then is a process of redemption, and then it goes back to the same status because of that. So as long as it's not cut, it goes back to the same point of a consecration. 30, tifshot, so you can resolve this predicament from this Mishnah, the by Rav Yoshaya. If those sapling return to be consecrated by the statement of Rav Yoshaya, Hanoten shtei prutot leisha. Someone gives a woman 2 valuable coins, for example. That's pruta can be just basic valuable currency. ואמר לה, and he said to her, באחת התגדשי לי היום, ובאחת התגדשי לי לאחר שאגרשך. So he said, okay, one you betrothed to me today, and one after I divorced you, and then he divorced you. So the question is, the second betrothed is effective or not? Because here is something that we discussed many times, the idea of davar shelo ba la'olam, which is you make a statement over egg that wasn't out of the chicken or baby that was not born yet. So since it's not at the front of us, therefore you cannot make a final rational decision over that. So example, the Gemarrah in Tractate Kiddushin, page 63 said, if someone gives a woman a ring and said, you betrothed to me after your husband passed away, it's ineffective. Why? Because at the moment he gave her, she was married, so therefore the moment she's married and someone else come in and propose her is total meaningless. So even you can say, okay, so she's now a widow or she's now divorced, but the previous action with that man is meaningless. Okay? Hachenami, the same here, the havu kiddushei, so we juxtapose to our discussion, and he said here in our situation that you may say that the matter of betrothal is effective. So according to Bar Pada, a person can consecrate this sapling until it redeems, and then they have this level of sanctity afterward. So you can say that the halot kiddushin, the matter of betrothed, may be at least the way that it's appear after he divorced her, and he doesn't need to go ahead and remarry her. So let's make sure that we all understand it. Let's call him name. Reuven. He goes to Sarah and he gives her 2 valuable coins. And he said, this one, the first one, today you betrothed me. Okay? The second one, I'm planning to divorce you 2 weeks from now. So after I divorce you, I'm going to marry you again, and this is for the second one. Okay? So we are now dealing more in the theoretical matter in order to conceptualize the logical idea of transactions between partners or the matter of betrothed. Because from that point we can juxtapose to our original discussion, which is consecrated item, for example of sapling, before the cuts, and how that cycle will go back and forth. So what happened here is, for sure, the first coin is effective one. Why it's effective one? Because she betrothed him, he gave her, and she acquiesced, or she consented to that. So it's a matter of marriage, right? But to to set it up for divorce and then to be married again, that's ineffective, because it's later. So the school of thought originally was that it is effective. Why? Because it's already set up originally in advance. So from that point, there are several ideas involved with this that goes a little deeper, the next step. Rabbeinu Nissim Deran said you derive from that the whole concept of betrothed by the biblical terms, which is, and that's a huge difference between Reform movement and Orthodoxy. And Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the great leader of American Orthodox Jewry, explained it at length in his responsa. Reform, for example, wedding, you have a contract of partnership between the two. And that partnership, it's kind of nice contract, but in a sense of halot kiddushin, meaning matter of effectiveness of a biblical term, which is a commitment of marriage between two partners, it doesn't have that effect. It's invalid. Why? Because the biblical term saying that the Torah used the term, if a man acquire a wife. What does that mean, acquire? We are not, God forbid, speaking about women like in a different class citizen, God forbid. We are talking about situation that he commit himself, the way that the Torah described in Book of Shemot, to shelter her, to take care of her, to support her, to give her clothing, to give her a need, even included a personal relation. He committed himself to these three items. So in that sense, the Ran explained and he said, her point is she accepting his proposal. She accepting his proposal, meaning in a sense either the act of being acquiesce or the idea of that she said, I agree upon, that's basically make it happen, but the initiation, the essence of that manner of betrothed is the husband. Furthermore, and again, take it the right way, biblically speaking, the girl, quote unquote, belonged to her father when she is a minor, meaning she was born, the father, daddy, is in charge, okay? And God forbid if daddy passed away, as we said, before the age of bat mitzvah, so the mother, the oldest brother, can marry her by a rabbinic view. But she, in that sense, reshut ha'av, she is part of the father's domain. The moment she gets married, she, again, we're speaking dry law, so just take it in the right concept, right? The transferring of the right or domain goes from her father to her husband. So in a sense, the husband supposed, by the biblical term, obligated to protect her, to shelter her, etc., etc., etc. The discussion we have in the previous tractate is after it's all said and done, if she, God forbid, she lost her husband or she divorced her husband, that's a question, what is exactly her status? Can she go back to her father or she's on her own? But here for our discussion, what we understand, what we derive, that's the Ran said, and furthermore the Avnei Miluim, the Ktsot HaChoshen, elaborates on that and said, you see from this discussion the way that the two coins, and he give her and he condition it for the second stage, etc., etc., that in one hand you cannot do both in one coin, you have to have two. But by the same token, the key part of all these transactions is, for the lack of a better term, is in the control of the husband, which means he's the one who needs to make this happen and she basically goes along. And that's a very important difference between a valid Orthodox wedding and non-Orthodox. Okay? It'arbeu Rabbi Yirmiyah. So here you have a students, as we said, that have these heating discussions over this issue. And Rabbi Yirmiyah, which was already old, as we said, he was dozing. So people who are not familiar think that he's not listening, but sure enough, his brain is sharp. So he opened his eyes and he's like, strongly commented, and he said, Amalu, he said to this great rabbi, Rav Avin and Rabbi Yitzchak, he said, Maika medamitun pda'anhu lefda'um acherim. How do you compare sapling that he redeemed, that the person who consecrated it and he go to that cycle, remember that cycle until he cuts, to a situation that other redeems them. Hachei amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is the correct statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Pda'an hu chozrot ukdoshot. If he redeems them, they automatically become consecrated again. So that's follow the word of Bar Pada. Since at the time of redemption they return to his domain, and therefore they have part of that original first consecration, pda'um acherim ein chozrot v'kdoshot. But if other redeems them, they do not automatically become consecrated again, even they are later do that, recovered by him. Ve'isha. Now we talk about husband and wife. So he said, she is betrothed, and then she divorced, kivda'ua acherim damya. So she, in a sense, is like others redeem the saplings. So because the moment that he divorces her, she leaves his domain for her own, his earlier marriage act is rendered ineffectual. The whole idea the rabbis elaborate, that's the way the Rosh said in Iran. The Torah used the term get kritut, which means you have a covenant, right? It's like brit, it's a covenant, and then you, I'm using literal sense, but it's like you're taking a knife or you're taking a scissor and you cut. So the idea of bill of divorce is basically you cut it, you cut. So therefore, if a person make a precondition while she's still married, no matter what the relationship she have with her husband, he cannot make a stipulation in advance that she will be betrothed to him after she divorced her husband. Furthermore, there is a notion, if you remember we studied it, that in some cases, if it was a relation between married woman and man, and then she divorced her husband, is a serious notion of the rabbis if they can get married afterward. Anyway, so a strong objection. Anyway, itmar nami, amar Rabbi Ami, amar Rabbi Yochanan, lo shanu ela שבדען הוא, אבל בדעום אחרים, אין חוזרות וקדושות. So this apply only if he redeemed them, but when other redeem them, they not automatically become consecrated again. Now we go to the Mishnah that speaks about Neder Prati, which is a personal matter of vow in a different way. The key learning now is the language which people use. You go by the colloquial or the expression that people use. For example, הנודר מיורדי הים מותר ביושבי היבשה. If someone who takes a vow that he will not derive benefit from a seafarer, meaning people who are goes on the most of the life they are on a boat, right? So mutar biyoshvei hayabasha, so he's permitted to derive benefit with those who live in a dry land. So the idea is, Tosfot explained that we have to remember that we're not talking about one-time long-distance travelers. We talk about someone who has traveled a lot. מיושבי היבשה, those in the dry land, עשו מיורדי הים. Why? שיורדי הים בכלל יושבי היבשה. So the Meiri explains that that's what he meant in that vow, that it's all included. Furthermore, לא כאלו שהולכים מעכו ליפו, אלא במי שדרכו לפרש. You're not dealing with those who go from one city of Akko, it's in North Haifa, to those who go to Jaffa, which is a short distance. But we are talking about those who go for a long distance. So the Gemara later on explain if that apply, this statement apply on the first clause, on the Reisha, or on the last one, the Seifa. Now, the key is, here, you have people, for example, in our neighborhood who serve in the Navy. So as much as they serve on a submarine, on a boat, or whatever it is, when it's all said and done, eventually they will come back to dry land. So that's part of what the Gemara is going to tell us. Rav Papa ורבחה ברי דרביקה, אחד מתני הרישא ואחד מתני הסייפה. One said that this statement goes by the first clause, one by the last clause. Man, the matne hareisha. Again, this speaks about the last statement in the Mishnah, that you do not compare those who travel from Akko to Yafo, it's a short distance in Israel, than those who go in a long one. Man, the tane hareisha, who one that said that this statement applied to the first clause of the Mishnah. Matne hachi, hanoder miyodei hayam, the one who made a vow from those who seafarer, mutar beyoshvei hayabasha, is permitted from those who who benefit from those who are land dwellers. Ha biyordei hayam, however, those who goes by the sea, asu. So those who seafarer, he is permitted. He is prohibited. Ve'lo ke'elu, and it's not like those. 30b, ha'olchim me'akko leyafo, dehalein. It's not like those who travel in short distance from Akko to Yafo. So since those who are not seafarer, only a little bit, because it's a short distance, yoshvei yabashaninu, ela mimi shedarkan lefaresh, as we said, those who go in a long distance. So the Keren Orah elaborates, and he said, according to this view, the Mishnah is lenient, that he incorporates in his vow and his neder only those who seafarer that goes a long distance, and not those who go in a short distance. For example, think about people who live in Venice. How many of you visit Venice? Right? Okay. So in Venice, you want to visit your neighbor, what do? You take your little boat and you go across the street for your neighbor, right? So that's not considering a seafarer, right? It's just in a proximity, right? In the close to where you live. Uman de matnei aseifa matnei achi, hanoder miyoshvei yabasha asur ביורדי הים, ולא באלו ההולכים מעכו ליפו בלבד, אלא אפילו במי שדרכו לפרש, even the someone who goes in long distance, הואיל וסופו ליבשה סליק. So the Mefarshim, the rabbis explain that this is a stringent. The idea is that when it's all said and done, eventually he will be in a dry land. So therefore, one who is applied to the dry land is also prohibited, according to the last clause of the Mishnah, to those who is a seafarer. Next Mishnah, dealing with a different expression of vow. So for example, someone make a vow and he said, I will not derive benefit from those who see the sun. Hanoder mero'eh hachama, asu af besumim. So since he pronounced a neder to those who see the sun, so now even for those who are blind, he is prohibited. Why? Because they don't see the sun, obviously. Shelo nitkaven ze, you see how important is the intent, that this person have the intent, ela lemi shehachama ro'a otan. All those who's in our language, right, the sun sees. So even the Rosh said he did not express it lucidly. We goes not by his heart or thought, we goes by his expressions. So the Ritva elaborates and said even those who are blind from birth is prohibited, that they never see the sun in their life. My Tama, what's the rationale, what's the reason for that? Mi de loka amar minaroin, because we go, as you see, very seriously at the expression, and it not said from those who see, which will exclude blind people. Instead, he said those who see the sun, which basically make an exclusion. La'apuke dagim ve'ubarin. So you exclude the fish and the fetuses, which are not visible to the sun. Why? The fish is inside the water, the fetus is inside the mother's womb, so you don't see the sun. So that's the Tosfot explained, that therefore it's basically exclusion. Furthermore, Rabbi Yaakov Amdin said, even sometimes you see the fish on the surface of the water, but they never been total out in a full manner out of the water, that the sun fully cover their body. Hanoder, next Mishnah, Hanoder mishchorei harosh, one who takes a vow that he will not derive any benefit from those who have dark hair. It's just an example. Asur bekerchim u veva'alei seivot. He is prohibited to derive benefit from bald people or those who have a white hair. Even that the hair is not black, it's white hair. That's the way the Ran and Tosfot said. Umutar, and he allowed benashim uviktanim, she'en nikra'in shchorei harosh ela anashim. That the dark-headed is only referred as the idiom for adult men. Soon you see what's the idea. So the Gemara asks a question here again. We're dealing with an expression. How do you interpret the expression? We want to emphasize that what you have in your mind and what you express in your words, even it's in conflict, we go by the way that you express yourself. Okay? So my tama. So what's the reason that we understand? And again, this is just some type of a example, just to give us an idea, but it can imply to other. It's like prototype, right? Example: my tama mideloka amar miba'alei se'ar, since the one who make the vow did not say from those with hair. So it means that he intend also bald people. So therefore, that's the expression you take. ומותר בנשים ובקטנים, שאין נקראים שחורי הראש, אלא אנשים. So that's the statement in the Mishnah, that it's an idiom that apply only to adult men, the black-headed. Why? My tama, אנשים, this is so interesting. אנשים זמנין דמחסו רישיו וזמנין דמגלו רישיו. When it's come to men, sometimes they cover, sometimes they not cover the hair. אבל נשים לעולם מיחסו וקטנים לעולם מיגלו. Women cover the hair, and men and the minors always they hair uncover. So again, this is a lot of rabbinic writing over that. Number one, we'll start with the Vilna Gaon. Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna said in Orach Chaim, chapter 8, that if you go by the simple dry law, you can derive from that it's not a big issue. If you're not davening, you go uncover the hair. However, the rabbis totally disputed that, they totally disagree, and said, if it's derech hakrai, like the chief rabbi of France that announced that it's so much anti-Semites, so you see students with kippah, they beat them up, right? So he said either you wear a baseball hat or it's better not to wear. So again, that's an exception. But the idea is the way that they code Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, chapter 2, Mishnah Berurah, Khatam Sofer, so many rabbis said that it's something that already instituted. So even the Marshal asked a question how far you go with that institution, but the way that the Khatam Sofer express it, this is something that we accept upon ourselves. And again, this is a man. When it's come to women, the Gemarrah in Ketubot, page 72, if you remember, explained clearly that it's an obligatory. So now the question is, how far you go with this? The Magen Avraham have a big write-up. If you differentiate between the time that she praying or the other times, if you how far you go with that. If you look at the Islam, and I have the privilege many times to talk at the college with the Islamic scholars, they say that their institution of covering hair, it's based on Judaism. It's all come from Judaism. That's what they said. And they, in every place, any scholarship, any writings in Islam literature, they say that it's start with Judaism. So it's kind of fascinating that you have now, what is it, 1.7 billion, I think, people that follow that code. But again, I have a friend live in Staten Island, New York. He's a Yemenite rabbi. So he have unmarried daughter that cover her hair. So one time I asked him, he says that they have a different tradition. But again, if you go by the Magen Avraham, for example, typical Beis Yaakov girl, so there are some who have this tradition that when they daven, they differentiate between the daven. But here the way that they said, Aval Nashim Le'olam Michasu, the Gemara used the term that those women are always covered, Uktanim Le'olam Migalu. Hanoder Min HaYeludim, good morning Dr. Friedman, the one who pronounced the Neder prohibited before from the Yelodim. So there are a few versions. The idea is it's either people or even animal that's already born. Motar banoladim, that those who are soon to be born, min hanoladim asu min hayelodim. Because again, this is the difference between present progressive tense to past tense, right? Rabbi Meir matir, Rabbi Meir allow af ba'ilodim. The Gemara explained, והחכמים אומרים לא נתכוון זה, אלא במי שדרכו להיוולד. From those whose nature is to be born. Running out of time. Okay. לרבי מאיר ולא מבעיה נולדים אלא ממאן דאסור. חסור מחסר והחקטן נותר מן הילודים מותר מן הילודים, מן הילודים אסור בילודים. רבי מאיר אומר אף נודר מן הילודים מותר בילודים, כי איך נודר מן הילודים מותר בנולדים. So again, you juxtapose between the two circumstances. The same way as one make a vow for those who born is not prohibited for those who will, the same apply the other. אמר לרב פאפא לאביי לממרא דנולדים דמתילדן משמע. You mean to say that noladim connotes those who to be born in the future. אלא מהתהדיס, a famous statement that Yaakov Avinu, Jacob said to his son Joseph before he passed, in regards to Menashe and Ephraim that was born in Egypt. They said in Bereshit in Genesis 48, verse 5, Shnei vanecha noladim lecha beretz Mitzrayim. Ha-noladim, ha-chename demit yaldan, or the it yaldan hu, so, which means that it's a future. Menashe and Ephraim already born, that's before Yaakov passed away. Vela mai de it yaldu mashma, ela me'ata dichtiv, this is another pasuk in the book of Kings, chapter 13. This is the prophet said to Yerovam, the first king of Israel, at that time, right? Hine venolad David Yoshiyahu shmo. Here is the son that Nolad, that was born to the house of David, Yoshiyahu, his name. So the idea here is Hachena medehava. So it means that Yoshiyahu was born. Veha adain Menashe, that the Menashe, the grandfather of Yoshiyahu. So the Parat Yosef elaborates and said, why you speaking in that language in a future versus present. So it means Nolad, it's like the future one. But again, this is a big discussion among the Binyan Echezkel, Parat Yosef, and other rabbis, how exactly you take this statement. Ela mashma'achi o mashma'achi u'medarim alech achar lashon le'adam. Usually that's the key point, that when it's come to vow, you go by the common language that people use, like almost like a colloquial. וחכמים מאוד כוון זה למי שדרכו להיוולד. הפוקי מאי, להפוקי לגים ועופות. So you go by those fish and birds, you exclude them because they hatch from eggs rather than emerge alive from their mother. That's the way the Ran and Rosh explain to us. So there are 2 points I would like to make. Number one is the Avnei Yashve. It's I have a discussion with the late Rav Vosner, how exactly you treated the language of people. For example, someone committed himself to study half of the night until midnight. All of a sudden they're changing the clock. How you go now? You should study another hour or not? It's a discussion based on this Gemara. Another point is the Shvut Yaakov. Ask a question. If someone commit himself that he prohibited from a fetus of animal. So the fetus is now part of the mother, right? Mm-hmm. Because the mother, in a sense, is pregnant. Now the question is that mean the fetus net, or it means that since it was at the time that the fetus was in its mother's womb, so now he is prohibited to plow or do all the work of the mother's animal? Is that both or only the fetus? So he said, since we said Nedarim alech achar lashon le'adam, since when it's come to vow, the Shvut Yaakov said, you go by the language, the expression of people, and since people use it for the fetus, and in that sense it meant the fetus, so you're allowed to go and use the mother animal for work, because that's the manner of language that people expresses.
Yachem leshuloim alachai yeshuloim malachai